My guys, how's it going? It has been the hottest of minutes. Hope you're all good. Should explain where I've been, not gonna, because I've got a new review for you guys. And let me tell you, if you are one of those people that has this fantasy about Ethan Hawke kidnapping you, taking you to his basement, leaving you down there with nothing but a broken phone and a dirty mattress, occasionally checking in on you, giving you some grub, giving you bits of food, but then, you know, taking it away from you, teasing you, playing games with you, you're not gonna get out, you're stuck, you're probably gonna die, all hope is lost, then I don't know what to say, man. You need to see someone. But you'll also probably want to check out The Black Phone, which is a new horror film which just came out with Ethan Hawke in it. But do see someone first. I do think you should prioritise that. The Black Phone is a new horror/thriller starring Ethan Hawke, directed by Scott Derrickson, who was responsible for that other horror/thriller starring Ethan Hawke, directed by Scott Derrickson, Sinister, which, I don't know if you remember that film, it was pretty fucked up, huh? Really big fan of that film. Wasn't the biggest fan of Scott Derrickson's work with other stuff like Doctor Strange. We won't go down that rabbit hole. But I like him enough to want to check out this new horror thriller coming out, especially because it's also starring Ethan Hawke, and it looks like it's got that same sort of sinister vibe to it. But is it any good, is the question I'm assuming a few of you might be muttering. Maybe someone? Well, I'm going to try and answer that for you, but before I do that, like and subscribe. It's a YouTube video, so I gotta lead with that. Anyway, housekeeping out the way, shall we talk about this film? The Black Phone disappointed me. Apparently I don't tease things now. There we go, end of the review. But I'm just going to come out and say it. This was one of the most baffling film watches of the year for me. I don't think anything's going to top it in terms of just being like a, what? Because The Black Phone is such a peculiar and weirdly plotted film. And it's a really weird one to try and sit down and talk fully about to you guys because A, I don't want to spoil things and I feel like it's difficult to go into what doesn't work so much here without spoiling things, just in trying to make sense of things. And B, it's not like there are these big kind of glaring issues with the film. It's not like I can point to any one thing and be like, oh, that was bad and you did it badly. It's less that any of those specific things are really bad in a film and more that they just don't really amount to anything. And so the further you get along in this film, the more unsatisfying it becomes as you quickly realize that it's not really going anywhere. Like, this film doesn't really do much. The general premise of the film is that there's a serial killer that's snatching kids, or grabbing. He's called the Grabber, which, I'm gonna say it, is a silly name for a serial killer. But the kids in this town are going missing. This guy called a Grabber is taking these kids, and one of these kids is our protagonist, who gets taken by the Grabber, and we follow him as he's stuck in a basement of the Grabber trying to get out. That's essentially the film. And immediately there on paper, there are things that I should have really, really loved about this film. I'm going to sound like a serial killer saying this, but I'm saying it anyway. Films about kids getting kidnapped, mysteries about serial killers, sign me up, I love it. And actually the setup of this thing, I really liked. I really liked the beginning of this thing. It drops you kind of right into this, I guess, sort of typical mystery thriller atmosphere where kids are sort of disappearing before we see what's actually going on. That first act is definitely this film's strongest part because I think Scott Derrickson does a good job of creating atmosphere and tone, and it's the same tone and atmosphere that was present, I guess, in something like Sinister. It feels very similar to that tone and atmosphere, and I think it works setting this thing up. But it quickly became apparent that this film wasn't really going anywhere with that setup, or at least in my opinion, it didn't really do much with that. And I think that kind of comes down to the fact that this thing is adapted from a short story. And I know that is often quite an easy thing to fall back on when criticizing a film. It's very easy to be like, oh, I know that thing was a short film, so it must be the fact that they're trying to stretch it out that is the problem here. Often, I don't think that is actually the case. I just think it's an obvious scapegoat for things. But I do think here it might not be the exact reason why this thing didn't work for me, but it does go quite a way to explain the main thing which I think unravels this film for me. And that is just that it doesn't feel like it has much to do for an hour and 40 minutes. It sets up the premise that these kidnaps are happening, and then there's an inciting incident. Yeah, cool, all going well. And then it just sort of feels like for about an hour, it's the same scene repeated with littered bits of these outside storylines to try and help it get to the end, and then it just ends. And that repetitive feel gets in the way of a lot of what this film could have done really well in the atmospheric sort of horror thriller moments. And they're in there, and I don't think it's completely terrible in that department. I'll get it straight out the bat. I don't think this thing's scary really at all, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for it. I don't think this film needs to be scary. it's often an easy thing to come out of a horror film and be like, it didn't scare me, bad horror film. But it's clear that the vibe that Scott Derrickson's going for here is not like a horror, like it's a horror thriller, right? It's not just about scaring you, it's about creating an atmosphere and a tone, and I think he does do that well, at least. But the moments of horror in there do feel lessened precisely because it seems like it's just sort of dragging things out. Like there's a really effective moment towards the middle of this film where we start to see these kind of, I guess, visions and ghosts and all those things, like the paranormal stuff starts weaving in. Really effective little scene, and then it just sort of keeps doing the same scare for about 40 minutes. And every time it happened, I was not scared, really. And ultimately, like, not even really that tense or nervous about it. When it first happened, oh, cool, don't want this to happen to our little kid protagonist. This is a bit weird. Fifth time it happens, I mean, dude, sit down, close your eyes, put the phone down. My guy. And this is where I begin to find it difficult to talk without spoiling things, but I'm going to attempt to anyway. The way this film incorporates all of the kind of, let's call them the supernatural elements in the film, what that's doing narrative-wise to drive the plot forward, to give the protagonist things to get him to the climax, is so unsatisfying in that it's just happening. It's just things happening that are helping this guy out. And that's it. And I kept waiting for it to click, for there to be the scene which sort of, I don't know, elevates that thematically and gives us a bit more reasoning to why it's all happening. The scene never comes, and maybe that's just on me wanting that, and it doesn't need that. I guess the people that love this film are probably going to say that, but it never comes. We get to the climax, and everything that's just been happening was just happening so that we could get to the climax. So watching this film felt a lot to me like just waiting for a reveal that never came, which is not satisfying. And on one side, I sort of appreciate the fact that it isn't feeding things to us like other horror films might have. And I do appreciate the fact that it's, I think, probably intentionally not explaining certain things in the film. But the narrative that it puts that in feels like it's begging for something, just a thread or two, something to make some things make sense in this film. And that culminates really frustratingly in a certain character's arc. There is a character in this film that has a power, right? And the power gets name dropped at the beginning, and you immediately go, cool. Well, then that's it. This is the film. But I kind of like that weird supernatural stuff, and I like that the film just throws you into it. So at the beginning, I was like, cool, let's see where this goes. This might be fun. And the character is one of the most bafflingly used characters I've seen in a film all year. She just has this power, and then a problem happens, and in 2 scenes, it feels like, she's like, cool, the power helps me, we'll just solve it. The film's saving grace for me is Ethan Hawke. You're gonna hear a lot about him. I've seen a lot of people saying that he's incredible, and his character is like amazing. It's like one of the big new horror icons. It's not that. I think his character sucks, but he is at least having fun in it, and I did enjoy watching him in every scene he's in. I don't really know what to say that hasn't already been said about Ethan Hawke. Very famous actor Ethan Hawke. He's good, surprise. But his scenes in the film do feel unnerving, mainly because he's just unnerving in it. He's an unnerving presence, and I think that's good, obviously. Again, though, and this seems to be a very common thread with everything in this film the more I think about it, I really wish there was something more to his character. Because as it stands in the film, he's just a very bad kidnapper that, I don't know, accidentally got away with it a few times, because the things he does are so silly, don't make sense to me. And while those things are happening in the film, there's this constant feeling like, I don't know, maybe he's one step ahead of everyone else, maybe he's playing this game. It's hinted at a few times that he's playing this game. It's never explained what it is. But then the film ends, and he just never was that. He just was bad. The motherfucker just stole kids, and then was like, yep, he's down there, I'm gonna kick it for a bit. And look, with a lot of horror films, I think if you start pulling at threads, you're always gonna find story beats and narrative plot points that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. So I'm reluctant to go too far down that rabbit hole. But there is one plot point in this film that happens and never worked. When it first happened in the film, I thought it was a joke that was gonna be like rectified later on, and they'd be like, oh, it was a misdirect or something. But it wasn't. It just was what this story was, and it legitimately ruins characters for me in this film. Yeah. The more I think about things in this film, the more they just didn't work for me at all, really, which is a real shame, because as I said, the pieces are there and I think could have really, really worked, and the atmosphere could have really taken this thing along. But it's such a shame that the things that didn't work got in the way of the atmosphere for me. I'm not going to remember much about this film, to be honest, in a few weeks at least, but clearly I'm a bit of an anomaly here. Everyone else that I've chatted to seems to have really enjoyed this and really connected with it. So I do think it's worth checking out just to see for yourself. At least just to see it and explain to me what you enjoyed about it. I'd like that. It's out on cinemas on Wednesday, so if you do check it out, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. We'll have a little chat. As always, if you enjoyed this video and you do want to see me talk about more shit, go ahead and click subscribe. Buttons down there for that. And loads of my social links are down there as well as my Letterboxd, where you can see my thoughts on films in real time, like this one, which I gave a star rating and ruined it for everyone else that was going to watch this video. See you guys soon for some more thoughts on more films, but until next time, I'm going to go wait on the road and just see if Ethan comes pick me up. Beer and a hang with Ethan in his basement with a broken phone and a dead mattress.